One morning, the Fat Controller came to the sheds with exciting news. As you may know, I have recently reopened an old scenic line. And in addition, I have arranged for a few special trains to run on it. The engines were all excited.
Do you think I'll be chosen, sir?
Huffed Rosie. Well, said Murdoch, I wouldn't mind if I would go, sir. After all, I do love some peace and quiet. Well, I'm afraid that none of you will. A visitor from the main line will be doing it instead, seeing as how you're all too busy with your own jobs. It'll be for 1 day or two, so when he gets here, I want you all to make him as welcome as possible. Yes, sir, said all the engines, although Rosie and Murdoch were the ones most upset. The visitor arrived next morning. Eric the Green Engine saw him being unloaded from a ship by Cranky the Crane.
Oh, this one's heavy. Feels like my crane arm's about to fall off.
Yo, what up? My name's Eric. You must be the new visitor, I suppose.
Indeed I am. I am Richard, and I'm excited in anticipation to see the wonderful sights of the island. Now be a good chap and show me the shed, please.
Certainly.
Smiled Eric.
I'm actually on my way there anyway, so come on.
Everyone was excited to see Richard arrive in their yard. Rosie especially wanted to speak to Richard, but to her surprise, he took no notice of her.
What's his problem?
Huffed Rosie crossly. Oh, maybe he's just tired. Besides, I wouldn't be if I spent all my time traveling on a ship, smiled Arthur. So Arthur tried to talk to Richard, but he completely ignored him, and instead spent most of his time in the company of the big engines, talking and laughing like grown men at a bar. Soon the Fat Controller arrived to welcome Richard grandly.
I am pleased that you have arrived, Richard. Now, your excursion begins tomorrow, so I want you to make sure that you get an early start to be ready before then. Yes, sir,
smiled Richard. That night, at Vigorstown Sheds, the small engines tried to speak to Richard again. But unfortunately...
Will you lot buzz off?
He snapped. I don't want any small engines bothering me. The small tank engines were offended.
We were only trying to be friendly. Besides, is there really like a prejudice you have against us?
Little engines aren't useful engines. I prefer to have some company with engines who are much more important.
Balderdash! We're all important here on this railway, regardless if we're little or large.
Richard just scoffed and continued chatting to Murdoch, leaving the small engines to go crossly to sleep.
Aren't you going to say something to me?
Asked Lady crossly. But Richard wasn't listening. He thought that he was the pride of the line.
What, you're not going to respond to me?
You may have a point. Now, what's the word I'm looking for? It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, yes. Go on and beat it, you conniving little scoundrel! You're spoiling my image!
Well, fine. Be that way.
Fumed Lady, and she steamed off in a huff. Soon, Richard and his special train were storming through the line. The scenery looked splendid, and everyone was having a great time. Except for Bertie Bus. You crazy hot rodder! Richard hurtled down the line, He was having a wonderful day, and was looking forward to a good chat with James, Gordon, and Henry again. Then there was trouble. As Richard drew closer and closer to the station, the driver heard a frantic hissing sound. Steam began to burst through Richard's pipes, as he quickly lost speed and had no choice but to stop. He wasn't going anywhere. "Oh, bug ya. Looks like you've sprung a leak, old boy. Well, looks like I'll have to call for help." While the guard went for help, they uncoupled Richard, who had enough steam to limp straight onto his siding out of the way. Soon Philip was called for the rescue operation, and then Edward came to take Richard's train on. After a short while, Richard was ready to move when Philip arrived. The other engines were surprised to see Richard being pushed by Philip. They can only laugh.
He doesn't look so grand now, does he?
Poor Richard could barely make a sound. He was terribly embarrassed. Richard was sent to the works for repairs. He felt very miserable. What seemed like a splendid day for him being turned into a disaster. Just then Lady showed up, but she had something different to say.
I told the other engines about your mishap today, and I just want to apologize for laughing.
"I know," said Richard, "and I'm equally sorry that I was so harsh on you earlier. I always see you smaller engines as common shunters arranging big trains for us. Nowadays I realize that I was wrong. Now everyone will realize how silly I am."
What? No, they won't. You actually did very nicely before the incident. It wasn't your fault, actually. Just considerable bad luck, that's all. You know, you could be actually pretty popular if you were a lot much kinder to bigger and smaller engines. Then we wouldn't have such a big grudge towards you.
Richard could only smile, despite the lack of face. He was so glad to see Lady being so kind to him that he forgot to feel sorry for himself. The next day, Richard was as good as new. He spent the rest of the day running on the scenic line with no mistake. This time, whenever he came across the smaller engines, he whistles kindly to them, and they always return with a friendly greeting. By the end of his stay, Richard was so pleased that he made so many new friends that he went home a happy engine indeed.